We're going to spend about 30 minutes talking about the Standard Response Protocol. Like many districts across the country, we're incorporating the Standard Response Protocol into our emergency procedures to improve student and staff safety during an incident or emergency. The Standard Response Protocol is not based on individual scenarios, but on the response to any situation, and 5 common actions. There are reserved slides for discussion where we can ask and discuss any questions. The Standard Response Protocol is based on 5 common actions that we take during a critical incident: lock out, lock down, evacuate, shelter, and hold. Each action is followed by a directive. Every action then has specific instructions of what to do in an emergency situation. When these are announced, the action and directive are repeated. Be an attentive listener. Here's what the directives state. Lock out. Get inside, lock outside doors. Lock out. Get inside, lock outside doors. Lock down. Locks, lights, out of sight. Lock down. Locks, lights, out of sight. Evacuate to a location. For example, evacuate to East High School. Evacuate to East High School. Shelter for a hazard using a safety strategy. For example, tornado warning. Move to your designated shelter area. Tornado warning. Move to your designated shelter area. Hold. In your classroom or area, clear the halls. Hold. In your classroom or area, clear the halls. We'll talk about lockout first. Why might we announce a lockout? There is a threat outside of the building. In a lockout, no one is allowed in or out of the building. There might be police activity in the area, or an animal on school grounds whose presence may be concerning, or someone who enters a school and is behaving in an uncooperative manner. In a lockout, no one enters or leaves the building. When we lock out, all students and staff must go inside the building. We will lock all exterior doors, and in most cases, teaching and learning continues inside as usual. Let's start with what to do in a lockout. The first one is simple. Get in the building and go to your classroom. For the most part, it's business as usual inside the building. Once all students and staff are in the building, no one is allowed in or out of the building. Yes, that means even if you have an appointment. If a lockout lasts into recess or lunch, still, no one is allowed in or out. We are staying in the building. The same is true at the end of the school day. Don't worry, we'll make up any missed recess minutes. Let's move on to lockdowns. Lockdown, locks, lights, out of sight. Lockdown, locks, lights, out of sight. Lockdown is used when there is a threat inside the school building or on school property. Now we'll talk about what students should do in a lockdown. Students should stay out of sight of the corridor windows. Sit on the floor and get low. How do you know if you're out of sight? If you can't see the hallway window, no one in the hall can see you. You will have a chance to find a space in your classroom today or later in the week that is a safe zone. Be absolutely silent. No sounds or lights should come from your phone. Most incidents are stabilized in 3 to 5 minutes. The school district will be contacting your parents by text, email, and phone calls. Just so you know, once the situation has stabilized, we may stay in lockdown a while longer until we are released by police. Do not open the door for anyone. Law enforcement will unlock the door and release the room. Only law enforcement are trained to know when it's safe enough to open the door. Lockdowns might take a while too. While you wait, you'll need to stay in one spot. Don't move about the room. Stay calm and help those around you stay calm too. Remember, the school district will be notifying your parents and keeping them informed of the current situation. And just so you know, it's your teacher's job to take attendance during this time. What if we're outside? If you're outside and a lockdown is called, do not go back in the building. Rather, go to a safe location. Maybe that's a local business, a friend's house, or a library. We'll talk more about that safe location later on. What if there's no teacher? All students should get behind a locked door if possible. If you can't get to a safe, lockable room, one option is to hide. You may try to evacuate if the threat is not in your immediate area. All teachers will be checking the halls for students to get them in classrooms quickly before we lock and turn the lights out. Follow adult directions. Get to a classroom, any classroom, as quickly as you can and lock down. If the classroom is already locked, then students should find a place to hide. Evacuating may be another option. We'll talk about that next. Remember, if the door is closed, it is locked, so you should not go from classroom to classroom. If you hear the fire alarm, do not leave your safe location unless you are certain a fire is threatening your room or you see smoke. If you are forced to evacuate due to a fire, the hallway may not be your best option. Look to windows and other exits in the room. That was locked down. Now let's talk about evacuate. There are a few different types of evacuations we should talk about. The first is the typical fire or gas leak evacuation, in which staff and students leave the building in an orderly fashion. Another is self-evacuation in response to a school violence event, if it's not possible to get behind a closed and locked door. And then there are police-led evacuations. In the most traditional form, evacuate is how to move students in an orderly fashion from point A to point B. A fire drill is really evacuate out of the building. With the standard response protocol, evacuate is always followed by a location. For instance, evacuate to East High School. Evacuate to East High School. For a fire drill, we often evacuate to places around the school, but the same locations each time. Let's talk about what students do in this type of evacuation. You'll leave your stuff behind. Whatever's in your pockets, you can bring. Students will need to follow staff directions. During an active violence event, you have the option to self-evacuate if getting behind a locked door is not possible. Consider grouping up with others when self-evacuating. Turn to a neighbor and tell them 3 safe places you could run to. Before you run, think. Can you visually see the door you're going to go out of? Do you know you can make it there? Once you start, don't stop running. Keep running until you are somewhere safe. Make sure to call your families when you get to a safe space. You should also remember that police will be arriving, so you need to keep your hands up and empty while running out of the building.
When law enforcement begins the evacuation, here's what to expect. An officer will unlock your door and enter the room. Stay where you are. The officer will give you specific instructions you must follow. You will be asked to leave your stuff behind, form a line at the door with the teacher in front, hold hands with the person in front of and behind you until you reach your final destination. Wait quietly for further instructions from the officer. You will be told to proceed to the next officer. Walk, do not run, and do not talk. Follow the directions of the officers guiding you during the evacuation. They could be giving you verbal directions or hand signals. Watch the pace of your line. Be aware of obstacles such as corners, fallen objects, debris, or stairs which may affect the speed your line can move. Don't stop until you reach the location you were directed to.
Keep moving all the way to the end of the fence. All the way to the end of the fence. Keep moving.
Verify attendance and wait for further instructions.
Connor.
Here.
Andrew.
Here.
Here's what students do in a police-led evacuation. It's important that students keep their hands visible to the officers. The same is true for staff. Officers need to see that your hands are empty. Most likely, you'll be asked to leave your stuff behind. Law enforcement might tell you to put your hands on your head, keep them up in the air, put hands on shoulders, or hold hands. Follow their directions. Don't be surprised if officers are loud and directive. They don't know the extent of the incident yet. They will give direct instructions that you should follow. Again, be sure to keep your hands visible. Why do we keep our hands visible? Law enforcement officers are trained that hands could hold dangerous things. They will want to see your hands. Law enforcement might tell you to put your hands on your head, keep them up in the air, put hands on shoulders, or hold hands. Again, follow their directions. Will police search you in a police-led evacuation? They might. During a police-led evacuation, officers will want to make sure that students and staff aren't at further risk. They may search students and staff for other dangerous items based on observations. It's important to keep your hands free and visible. That was evacuate. Now, let's talk about shelter. We state the hazard and then the safety strategy. So what's the hazard? Something dangerous. It could be weather, like a tornado, or it might be something like a chemical spill nearby. Your safety strategy is what you do in response to a hazard. The announcement could include the hazard, for example, a tornado, and a safety strategy, move to your designated shelter area. For example, attention students and staff, we are under a tornado warning. At this time, move to your designated shelter area. And this would be repeated. When instructed to take shelter, you will be directed to your designated shelter area. Always be prepared for the unexpected. Continue to listen for instructions. The situation could change quickly. Be aware and prepared to evacuate if directed. Stay sheltered until an all clear is announced. That was shelter. And finally, we'll discuss hold. Hold in your classroom or area. Clear the halls. Hold in your classroom or area. Clear the halls. It is used when we need to keep the hallways clear. This could be due to a medical emergency, someone not making safe choices, or a large spill of some kind. Here's what students do. If you're in the hallway, you should go back to class quickly and remain in the classroom until the hold is lifted. Teaching and learning will continue as usual during a hold. What about specials or recess? You will stay in your class until the hold is lifted. Make sure to listen to staff instructions because they could be telling you what you will do to make up your PE class. It's a shared vocabulary among students, staff, and first responders during any type of crisis or emergency here at school. Now, all adults have a plan and know what to do if it's needed. As a district, we're joining millions of students, hundreds of thousands of educators, administrators, school staff, and tens of thousands first responders who are now using the same language, training, and expectations of behavior during a crisis. Make sure you go home and share with your families what you learned today.